All right. So glad to have everybody on board. I'm Joe.
I'm Kate.
And this is going to be a module about increasing your conversion. It's one of the most important skills that exists in real estate or in any business, to be honest with you. And one of the things we're going to give you, you're going to be able to walk away having more confidence in your skills and know that you have some very specific tactical tools in your tool belt to help do more business. So, Kate, you ready to get going?
Yeah, let's go.
What's your favorite thing about this module?
I like that this helps us identify their motivation.
Ooh, because motivation helps us get them to the closing table, right?
And predict our income and when.
Ooh, love that. Awesome. So stay tuned, guys. This is a module that you got to watch.
All right, Joe. So what does lead conversion mean and why does it matter?
You know, lead conversion is the process of taking somebody who could be a possible transaction, right? The human being. And it's actually the process of like understanding who they are, what they want, and whether they're a good fit to do business with them. And I think that one of the challenges there is that's a skill set, right? It's a skill set and it's something that is not necessarily worked on. Like, where do you learn conversion anywhere, right? And so the ability to connect with people and the ability to understand them at a deeper level lets you have a more genuine relationship. And it's also it's a better, more pleasurable sales experience. I would. What's the tactical takeaway that we're going to have here in this module? Because I think it's such a simple thing, this tool that we're going to talk about. What is it?
Yeah. It's actually interesting you said, side note to this, where can you learn how to lead convert, which is just a sales thing. So I'll just snippet that later. Talking to people like they're actually humans and bringing the emotional experience to it and not talking to people like it's actually a sales process. Okay, so you asked, what are the tactical things? I'm going to answer that now. So the tactical portion of this would be questions. Like, what specifically are the questions that you could ask the potential client to find out and uncover if they truly are a lead and if they are, what their motivation is. By motivation, we mean when are they looking to make a move or make a purchase or whatever in the sales process.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it really comes down, it's very simple. So, for everybody watching, this is something you learned probably in first or second grade. And we're going to go all the way back there and
back to the basics.
Back to the basics, right? So we call them the 6 connectors. And it's really a series of 6 questions that if you were to just meet a stranger and your only mission was to get all 6 of these questions asked, you would leave that interaction with that stranger with a whole different level of connection, right? At the end of the day.
And by connection, you really just mean like an understanding of who they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. A human to human connection.
A conversation.
Absolutely. Because people do business with people that they know, like, and trust, right?
Right.
And the way that we get to know each other, decide if we like somebody and decide to trust them is through connection, right? So from a tactical perspective, these questions, again, first and second grade level. Good news, guys. You can do this. This is not advanced physics. It's the 6 questions you learned in first and second grade. So we can dive right into those because I think that they do all the heavy lifting and anything else that we do is just the fancy glitter on top.
So real quick, do you call a potential lead and start with these specific questions, or do you make a connection based off of some common interest that you find in the conversation and then gradually lead into these questions?
That's an awesome question. One thing that I teach often is that at the beginning of the conversation, you can ask 1 or 2 amazing open-ended questions that you don't have to waste a lot of time before you get to the connecting questions. There's like a tiny little asterisk to the 6 connecting questions, and that's you have to earn the right to ask them. And so if you start to ask them immediately without earning the right and not establishing a little bit of rapport and trust, it can feel like an interrogation, right? So the tiny little asterisk is make sure that you're using this tool at the appropriate time.
Okay.
Generally speaking, a great open-ended question is, what brings us here today? Or what made you reach out, right? If they're reaching out to you, hey, what made you reach out? right?
I was going to ask you and like slow you down and bring you back to, you said start with an open-ended question. A lot of people aren't necessarily familiar with that language, right? So what is the difference between an open-ended question and the opposite of a closed-ended question?
Sure. Well, it's actually easier to define an open-ended question by starting with a closed-ended question. So a closed-ended question is going to be a question that can be answered with some variation of yes or no, and does not require the receiver of the question to give any additional information.
Right. So can you give an example?
Sure. Did you eat breakfast today?
No.
Cool.
Now the conversation ended.
And right, like it's like an awkward pause, right? So let's switch that to an open-ended question. Hey, Kate, what do you love to have for breakfast?
Cereal.
Cereal. And what did you have this morning?
Cereal, cinnamon toast crunch with oat milk. It was delicious.
Oh my gosh, that sounds delicious. Let me ask you, how often do you get to have your favorite breakfast?
Like twice a week.
Okay, right. So the open-ended question led to a natural interaction, right? And so we find oftentimes, I listen to call recordings in a legal way. I listen to call recordings pretty often. And the difference in the way that a conversation goes between a closed-ended question, starting the conversation, and an open-ended question, it's dramatically different.
There's a book about this.
What's the book?
What's the book? Well, The Coaching Habit has a lot of open-ended questions in it.
Yeah. Absolutely. So there's a ton of language books that I love to use as resources, and we can give those to our folks as a resource, as a guide resource. So make sure that you check out at the end a list of the books that we recommend in terms of language skills. But the reality is these 6 connecting questions, those connectors, you can thank your first and second grade teacher for. So let's go through them. Okay. So first one is who.
Yeah. So who's making the decision? Who's going to be impacted by the decision?
And also, who are they? So one of the challenges I give the guys that I work with and ladies is understand, like, who are you? Who am I talking to? Right.
Can you give an example of what you mean? Wow, that was a closed-ended question. What example do you have for us better?
Sure. So help me understand who you are and how we got here.
But what are we looking for when we ask these questions specifically?
Specifically, we're looking for a little bit of understanding of the backstory of them as a person, right? Letting them define themselves, right, will give you a better insight into who they are. What made them up? What brought them to this point where they're going to make a decision? There's some soft nuance to that. And honestly, the other reason that I'm such a stickler about making sure that question is like on the list that we want to answer is because one of the biggest things I've seen that's a flaw in connecting conversations, lead conversion conversations, is that when we skip over who, because we make assumptions about who we're talking to, we actually we discredit the other person on the other end, and we don't ask their name. I listened to a call recording and 24 minutes of a really good conversation. And at the end, he was like, I didn't get your name. It just changed the whole, it feels icky then, right? And the other thing is that you can keyword backtrack key names, because there's the most important name that they want to hear is their own name. They love to hear their own name. But then they also want to hear their key loved ones as well, right? So if you get to know, so hey, who's going to be a decision maker? Who's going to be impacted by this move? Those are great questions to ask, right? So who's going to be impacted by this move is that's going to be myself and my daughter, right? Oh, okay, what's your daughter's name? Right? Sally. Okay. Oh, wow. So, hey, what's something that Sally's going to want to see in the house? Sally's going to want a backyard because she likes to play soccer. Okay. Hey, I appreciate you sharing that. Right. So it just changes that dynamic a little bit and lets you humanize the connecting questions.
And you're really looking for who's making the decision, who's going on the loan, who's making the purchasing powers and where and all of that.
Right. So and listen, for everybody watching, you can literally just write the word who and just make sure you have enough space around it. So when you have a conversation with a potential lead, that you just fill the space, because there's really 2 angles to this. There's the who from a personal perspective, right, and there's the who from the tactical, right? Like who's going on the loan, who's a decision maker, who needs to be there at the showings.
Because when you ask that, you can find out that the first time homeowner is really getting co-signed by their mom, and the mom actually needs to be on all the showings. Meanwhile, if you didn't ask that question, you could have spent 3 months showing the daughter, the actual buyer who you thought, a home. And when she finally finds something that she's interested in, now the mom needs to come out. And then the mom has a whole different perspective on what she thinks she's co-signing on. And now you have to start from scratch.
Exactly. Yep. It makes sure that you're respecting their decision-making process by putting the right people in the conversation from the beginning. Yep.
Okay. What else did we leave out about the who section?
I don't think we left anything out. And that was a great open-ended question, by the way.
Yeah. We practice those here. All right. The next one is what?
So what is a huge one? So buckle up, everybody, right? So I think generically speaking, the way that I would think of what is, what do they want? But from a broader perspective, we really want to understand what's going on, and we want to understand what is important, and even deeper than importance is significance. We've changed our language. If you can't tell, we're big sticklers on language. We've changed our language to be around significance. Hey, what's significant about this move? Ooh, right? Think about the answers you can get with that. So what is a big deal? Now, here's the other, again, we have an asterisk, is that there's another question I'm going to jump to, which is why. And why is critical. We need to know their why. Why are you moving? Why are you thinking about doing this? Like, really, right?
Their why drives everything.
The why drives everything. However, from childhood, we have been programmed to be a little defensive about the word why, right? Because your parents used why probably in a way, maybe your meanest teacher ever probably used why in a way that didn't feel great. Why are you doing that?
What example? Yeah, what example do you have?
Yeah, like, hey, why are you doing that? Think of it so the connotation of why can be a little like, right? You just said like the why drives everything. So we want to know, hey, why are you doing that? But the tonality between the way I just asked it and the way your teacher asked it, your body is still going to react in a little bit of a defensive way. So
come from curiosity.
Correct. So you want to make sure you're very careful about that. And the reason I'm saying that during the what question is because we often can change a why to a what. So why are you doing it can be changed to what leads you to do this. Right. So using what to your advantage, it can be a really big deal. And also just understanding, like, what is it about this transaction I need to know, right? That's a big, you froze.
Sorry, you should still be good.
Okay. So Kate, what did you learn about what?
What did I learn about what? To find out what is important to them, what will they be looking for, what made them call, and then what could sometimes lead or bleed into the why.
Absolutely. So speaking of going into why, that's the third question. Do you want to, what's that?
Yeah, let's skip to why.
Let's go to why. So there's a great book, probably somewhere on this shelf, called Start With Why. It's by Simon Sinek. And Simon talks in that book that essentially...
So who's Simon Sinek?
A genius and an amazing author. He wrote the book Start With Why. He wrote
He's
the
like
book...
a leadership guru.
Yes. Business.
TED Talks. Yeah.
Yes. He has a phenomenal TED Talk on the concept of starting with why. He also wrote the book, The Infinite Game, which is a great book for business owners and thought leaders to really think longer term. But essentially what he preaches and talks about is that everything goes back to why, right? People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it, right? And so it's important because the why behind somebody's decision-making process will drive a lot. In real estate, I think sometimes we hesitate to get into those really deeper questions, those emotionally engaging questions. And I'm challenged that every time you skate across something that's significant, like why, like the deeper why, every time you skate across that, you're leaving yourself very vulnerable because eventually that will come out, right? And if it's not in alignment with the transaction, right, that's where things go hairy, like a month in, and you're just like, oh my gosh, I wish I would have known how important that was.
So why do you think realtors or salespeople in general tend to skip over asking why, or a broader question, asking deeper questions?
I think there's two reasons. One is I think that it requires a little bit of bravery to engage your customer at that deeper emotional level. It's way easier to talk product than it is to talk person, right? You can't get your feelings hurt at product.
Which is interesting because that's the exact opposite of what we said in the beginning of people buy from you and work with you when they like, know, and trust you.
Right. That's
How
right.
would you do that if you don't do these things?
That's exactly right. Exactly. So, but as salespeople, we fear rejection, right? And so when we don't have to go where the feels are, it's a little safer. So I think part one is bravery, and I think part two is truly knowing, right? A lot of resistance to doing things comes from not either knowing what to do or knowing how to do them. So, and that's true. And I mean, we see that in lead generation activities, right? Oh, I don't want to pick up the phone and call them because I don't know what to say, right? And so I think part one is feelings, and part two is just literally like a lack of knowledge or practice.
I think everybody I think the point is though, like everyone knows what to say. You just have to act like they're another normal human being on the other end. Like you have to humanize the process in which we think of sales as this like scary thing. And it's just not. It doesn't need to be. It could just be purposeful conversations.
Purposeful conversations is probably one of the best descriptions of a sales process that doesn't involve the word sales. That's phenomenal. You know, it's interesting because we've actually redefined what a close means, right? So closing is the end of the sales process, and I don't want to skip ahead to that.
Right.
But we just call us a close, a natural resolution to a healthy conversation.
A natural resolution to a healthy conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning what?
So we preach win-win or no deal. We preach that we want to have great deals for our customers. Well, I would argue that that's absolutely impossible to do if you don't have a clear picture of what a win looks like to them. The only way you're going to get a clear picture of that is by having a healthy conversation. It goes right back to
find out what a clear win to them is.
You ask.
Interesting.
Right? So it goes right back to what you just said. And I think that, so if think about how far we are right now, right? We've done who, which is basically like, you know, hey, who am I speaking to today? And who's going to be a decision maker on this real estate transaction that we're potentially talking about, right? And then you go to the what. And that's really just like, what are we doing here? What brings us together? And then you go to the why, which is getting deeper. This is a little bit more of that internal stuff. This is really where bravery comes in terms of asking questions. Oftentimes I see a hesitation to go deeper to the why. Whenever you're working in the what and why world, one of the rules of thumb is to always go 3 deep when possible, right?
What example do you have? Do you want to practice?
Sure. So Kate, just share with me, what's got you thinking about moving? What's significant about this?
I'm looking for a bigger house.
Okay. What will a bigger house do for you?
Allow me to have an office at home.
Okay. Is there anything else I should know about that?
I prefer to just have like a private office. Right now, I work in the dining room.
Okay. What's it like working in the dining room? Is that working for you?
Oh, it's chaos. There's always all the people all over the place. I get super distracted.
Right. So time out of that role play, right? It took me 3 to 4 questions to get down to the word chaos, right? So at the surface level, it started with, I need an office. At the deeper level, it got to my current life is filled with chaos when I'm at work, working from home, right? You see, like, so that's the difference. I mean, you know, you're really just getting to that level. And it's not like it's not an interrogation. Hopefully nobody thought that sounded like an interrogation. It's just really about like, now I have an understanding. I can empathize because I've gotten to an emotional answer. The answer of I need an office. There's zero. How can I empathize with that? I can definitely empathize with my life is chaos when I'm sitting in the dining room. I can now picture that and I can understand how that chaotic life feels.
So can we fast forward for 2 seconds and let's pretend we're also showing houses now. Mm-hmm. And now you can use, if you remember and keep really good notes in your CRM, you can use that chaos section of needing an office and use that as a pain versus pleasure tactic when you're showing the property and you find the extra bedroom that could be converted into an office and use that as, wouldn't this be nice to have this property with this extra room so you could use this as an office so you don't have to work out of your dining room with all of that chaos going on so you could be more productive at work and get done earlier.
That's exactly right. So, for everybody that's watching this and probably thinking, really, we're breaking down the 6 questions I learned in first grade. You see the difference now because, right, realtors, like the running joke is like realtors just open doors. Well, I promise you're going to open a lot of doors that don't lead to deals if you're not at a deeper level of understanding with your customers and able to connect with them, because when they know that they've been heard, and that's a keyword backtracking is a very specific language tactic and strategy. When you keyword backtrack and they know they've been heard as a human being, they're much more committed and attached to you, and they feel respected and heard. And now they're not going to just no-show you at that next showing, right? Because you're the one that understands their current chaos and can help them get out of it, right? Pain versus pleasure, like you said. So it's huge. Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't necessarily think that this, like, if you can understand sales in general, sales, emotionally talking to people and converting them into something for real estate, you could do it for anything. So I don't necessarily know that it matters if we're just talking about real estate and using that as an example.
Do you want to know where one of the best places you can practice the 6 connectors?
Where?
Out in public.
Like what?
Like the bar or a dinner party or meeting somebody new, right? But like, think about that when, the traditional like meet and greet with somebody new looks like maybe 2 to 3 questions and then barfing some random story on them and then trying to find some commonalities and then like, navigating that, right? You can apply the 6 connectors anywhere. And I would argue that one of the sneakiest ways to practice your sales skills is that way. By the way, also works on kids and parents at the dog park. I mean, it's like literally just anywhere. What has you here at the dog park today? Oh, I'm here with my dog. Oh, cool. Do you have any more? All of a sudden, by the way, do you have any more is a who question, right? Getting to know who they are and who their family is. Like it's fun to do that. It becomes fun to do that.
So Joe, I'm going to backtrack you. You used the words or the phrase keyword backtracking. What can you explain for someone that hasn't studied that?
So keyword backtracking is tactic where and I use the word tactic and I'm like really hesitant to do that because it makes it seem manipulative. Okay. But keyword backtracking keyword backtracking is where you take the words that the other person said and you incorporate them into the response that you're going to give. And one of the most valuable things you can ever keyword backtrack is names, right? The next most valuable thing that you can keyword backtrack is emotional tied words, right? So one of the ways, what's that?
What's an example of an emotional tied word?
I'm glad you asked because I think that's best when displayed. So when you said the word chaos, I would have done this in that sales experience. I would have said chaos. What's that like? Right? Because catching on to that significant word, right? There's a lot more emotional intensity to the word chaos than there is to the word office. And so I want to drill down on chaos and then maybe ask, so how do we find a house that's chaos free, right? So you see now, right, it will then, they become drawn into the conversation and again, the answers write themselves.
Perfect. I love that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to move on to, how about we move on to when?
Let's do when. So we've done who, what, let's go to when. When is pretty straightforward, right? And yet when is an important one when it comes to the way you're about to act after this conversation. And what I mean by that is understanding the timeline that they're going to make a decision and make a move. Those are 2 separate timelines, by the way, right? Hey, when were you hoping to be in the home? Well, that could be 6 months from now, right? They picture themselves there. Okay. And when did you want to have a decision made and have things kind of moving forward and resolved? No. So you want to have certainty about your timeline, maybe in 2 to 3 months. You want to be looking for a home. You want to be, right? You want to give yourself 30 to 45 days to find a home. And then you want to be in the house in 6 months. So having a lot of clarity on the when will help you, because when I say that it's going to help you make educated activities, that's your follow-up timeline, right? There is nothing that breaks rapport more than talking to somebody in a different pace than they'd like to move. So great example of that is you're like, I'd like to buy this by the end of the year, right? And it's January. So you got 12 months that you're going to be going through the purchasing process. And then January 10th, your salesperson's like, hey, did you make a decision yet? January 15th, they're like, hey, I just wanted to follow up on this. I just wanted to make sure that we're, and you're like, hold on a second, right? I got 11 and a half months left. And you're talking to me like I need to make a decision. I feel rushed. I feel pressured. I'm out, right? So it doesn't mean you're out of the transaction, because if you're really committed to the transaction, you're going to do that. You're just going to lose rapport with that person and probably decide that they weren't respecting your timeline. Yeah. So I think when is sneaky in terms of that. Plus, then when you build out your follow-up campaigns, when you do your follow-up calls, your follow-up text messages, if you know their when, you can treat them appropriately.
I like that. And that leads us to a whole different conversation about follow-up and the tactical aspect of that, which is a different day that literally leads into that exact follow-up action plan, so to speak.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay. So pause real quick. In real life, my Zoom ends in 40 minutes. I can't upgrade this account. It says I'm eligible. I don't know what that means.
So we're at who, what, why, and when. We need how and where.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you want to, I can just restart and send you another link?
Yep. Just do that.
Okay. All right. So let me pause this.
Okay. So we just did where. I think we need to dive right into when. We just did when.
We did who, what, when.
We did who, what, why, and when. Now we got to do where.
Where and how.
Yep.
Okay. Did we cover when enough?
Yeah, I think when's good. Unless, do you want to do like a wrap up statement and then I'll move us into where?
Doesn't matter. I mean, I talked about what the tactical portion of that for follow up is. So
okay.
What else do you want me to say?
I think that's good.
Okay, Joe. So now we have where next.
So we've done who, what, why, and when.
Yes.
Right? And then we go to the where, right? And so where is kind of another tactical type question. And yet it's not just about answering the hey, where do you want to move, right? Which is kind of a very surface level question. It's like, hey, where do you see yourself, right? Let them visualize, let them paint pictures for you of where. And then again, this is another example where that first question might be tactical, but the second or third question might be much more based around significance, right? There's a big difference between I want to live in Smithville and I want to live in Smithville because my grandmother is very ill and I need to be within 5 minutes of her, right?
Right.
So the difference in understanding that you gain in that sales process, you got to ask those questions.
Right. Also, you mentioned it allows them to imagine themselves there, which is a psychological sales tactic as well. So when someone can imagine themselves there, like literally that's a phrase, like a sales tactic phrase, right? Out of one of our favorite books. Can you imagine yourself doing XYZ? Or can you imagine yourself moving from the city into the suburbs and having a backyard for your dog and kids?
Right. That's right.
And now they can envision that picture, which allows them to move forward quicker or easier, because change is very difficult for people, even if it is a positive change.
That's true. That's true. And again, this comes right back to what you shared about when, which is that you can bring that up later, right? That's going to be useful later in the sales process. I think that's the true for where, right? Like when you show them, here's a great, like, listen, realtors, we've all been, right? We've been there. They tell us they want to live in Smithville, right? They said Smithville. Then at 11 o'clock at night, they send you a website, maybe starts with a Z, could start with a whatever, right? They send you a link to a property that's not in Smithville. What happened, right? And so if they've given you more than just that first surface level answer of where do you want to look, and they say Smithville, if you get one or two levels deeper, you may have a better understanding of why that came about. And the other thing that happens is if you don't have that better level of understanding and they send you something and they said Smithville and they send you something in Jonesboro, you then turn around and you say, hey, hey, Sally, I noticed that, we talked a lot the other day about where you were looking to be. And you said Smithville was really important because of X, Y, and Z. And the property in Jonesboro didn't line up with that. Can you just share with me what led you to send me that property? And maybe the answer is, I had no idea. I didn't even see that. I was just looking, right? but like it'll help you understand. And if something changed or if their framework of what was important changed, you got to know that too, right? So
almost like 90% of the time, I'll use the 80-20 rule. Almost 80% of the time when you re-bring up what they told you, right? Like literally use the information that they gave you, they revert back. They're like, yeah, you're right. I was like being ADD or something. I was like being a squirrel on the internet and just wanted to shoot this over to you. But now that you mentioned that, you're right. I really don't want to be over there. I need to be close to my grandmother.
That's right. That's right. And you know, I think of this in the framework. I think this topic is so critical. This is a quality topic, right? The quality of your conversation. Well, in a market that's facing pressure, right? And I don't think we can ignore the fact that we're putting this material out at a time when the market is facing a completely different type of pressure. The quality of your work and the quality of the way you spend your energy and time, you cannot be driving to the wrong town because you're becoming an order taker and not asking questions, right? You have got to have that deeper level of understanding, and that's going to come from these types of questions.
That's right. I agree with that. Who wants to waste their time either? Like the other side doesn't want to waste their time. They are looking to you and working with you. So you are directing them. Like they're literally seeking advice from you 24/7, whether you realize it or not.
That's right. That's right. And it goes way deeper than just serving them with the real estate documentation, that, right, the basics of what we all learned from, right, real estate school. Like literally, like being able to be a service provider and help them have a great experience where they achieve their goals. That's what they're going to remember. They're not going to remember if you check they'll remember if they get sued, if you forget to check the wrong box. But they're way more concerned about what's in it for them than how you are tactically facilitating the real estate transaction.
It's an emotional purchase. It's an emotional time. Everyone's uncomfortable. Who wants to move?
Yeah, that's right.
All
Especially,
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, especially right now, again, I think efficiency and effectiveness are really important for us as business people. And the one thing that we've been willing to waste before, for some reason, I've met so many people who are willing to waste their time and energy and just can't do it. You cannot do it.
Yeah. Well, why do you think that?
Because
I don't think anyone voluntarily wants to waste, like realtors or real estate agents want to waste their time and energy.
It's a lack of understanding.
Of what?
When I say lack of understanding, I mean, it's a lack of understanding what's really going on. Like on the realtor side, not asking those deeper questions so that they understand. And I think on the other side, it's not understanding the significance of what they're saying, or, right. So like, it's super simple to send a property in the wrong zip code and you don't realize it's in a different school district, right? Like that's not their specialty. So just being on a common ground with a great level of understanding between the two parties, I think that's really where a great transaction lives.
Can we go back to the most basic thing? I think salespeople waste their time accidentally because they don't do what we're talking about. Totally. 6 connector questions, which seem like the most simple thing in the entire world, and yet lead to literally controlling the entire transaction.
Absolutely. So let's get to the last of the connectors. So we have what, why, when, where, and how. So the last one is how. And how is a great question because, and I'm just going to give you an easy one, guys. How? Here it is. Ready? Get your pens ready. In an ideal scenario, how do you see this transaction going?
This is the golden question you're giving everyone.
The golden question.
Write it down.
In an ideal scenario, how do you see this transaction going? And by the way, the most important part of this question is that you shut up at the end of it and make sure that they give you a great answer, right? The magic of this question, the reason it's the golden question is because the answer that they give to, in an ideal scenario, how do you see this transaction going, is they will literally tell you what their ideal transaction looks like. And then you just have to do the facilitation of that, right? And it'll also help you understand, we often deal with realtors. I've seen it, and I'm not pointing any fingers. I've seen realtors who complain that their customers are maybe a little difficult to work with. I would challenge that the realtor did a really crappy job of asking this question, because if you understand how their ideal transaction goes, and it sounds unrealistic, this is your moment to say, hey, So, I asked you how this transaction was going to go, and you said that you were hoping to look at somewhere between 90 and 140 properties, and you wanted to make sure that you got a deal that was somewhere about 30 to 40% off, right? The market's probably not going to let us do that. So what would you like me to do? Now I can uncover any unrealistic expectations and move us towards a commonality, or disqualify that we're probably not a great fit, right? So this how question is magical because it does a little bit of both. It gives you the recipe from the person who's going to eat the meal. They write the recipe. They say, I love it this way. And they say, this is how I want the transaction to go. And it also lets you start to uncover a little bit of what their expectations were, right, coming into this. And then you know how to serve them. That's how.
That's how. This also leads to the when as well, which if we ask them when first and they said, I want to move in the next 60 days, and then you ask how, they may not realize that something may be contingent upon, which is where you would find that out in this question. So I haven't talked to a mortgage broker yet or a mortgage lender yet. Okay, well, you don't even know if they can move in the next 60 to 90 days, which is what they originally told you. So
exactly.
First, now we have to revert back to the first step is we need to get you in communication with a mortgage lender. Or, I don't know if I need to sell my house first in order to move. I think I want to keep it and rent it out, and then I could just gradually move. Well, that's everybody's dream, right? Like everybody wants to gradually move. No one wants to sell their house and move into a new house the same exact day. So can you do that? Yeah. How do you know? You need to talk to a lender. Did you do that yet? No. Okay.
Right. If we recognize that in real estate specifically, it's our mission, our job to guide folks, we have to have this deeper level of understanding to be able to do that. They're not going to ask these questions, and they may not know that they need to give the information up, because putting all the pieces together is your job, right? And so you have to know, you have to be equipped with the questions that uncover those things to let you do your job well. And I think that goes back, something that we talked about earlier in the 6 connectors is like, this is really about delivering a great customer experience, because that's what we're in this for.
So Joe, you're telling me if I go back to the basics and I ask these 6, generally speaking, connector questions, this will help lead conversion.
Absolutely.
That's all I have to do.
That's it. It's the number one tool that you can use. It's not the only thing, right? I think one thing that I would encourage is that just generally a better awareness of your language and curiosity. We call it tactical empathy is a way to think of it, right? Coming from curiosity is a way that it's often talked about. We don't often get deep on like, what does it mean to come from curiosity, right? Like, it's one thing to feel curious as a person. You're like, I wish I knew what was going on over there. It's another one to have the questions, the tools in the tool belt that you can pull out and say, I'm curious and I know the question to ask that's going to satisfy my curiosity, right? So I'm not saying it's the only tool. I'm saying it's the one tool that will make a massive difference in the way that you are able to connect with your potential customers and serve them.
Which equals lead conversion.
Absolutely.
Moving people from leads, inquiries, first time call, to moving them through the sales pipeline to a closing.
Yep.
To $1. Purposeful conversations in and around these 6 connector questions.
That's it.
Cool. I feel great about this.
Me too.